What would you do if the most humiliated kid at school was hiding a secret that could change everything? That cold Monday morning, no one paid much attention to the new student who walked into the classroom. His shirt was wrinkled, his pants a little too short, and a faded backpack hung off one shoulder. He looked like just another regular kid, maybe even poorer than most, someone easy to ignore or to bully. His name was Daniel, and when the teacher introduced him, he simply nodded and took the empty seat at the back of the room without saying a word. He didn't look around, didn't try to make friends. He kept his eyes down as if he didn't want to be noticed. But in schools like that, trying to hide only makes you stand out more. That was all it took to catch the attention of the bullies, led by Leo, the classic schoolyard tyrant who thrived on tearing others down just to feel bigger. One quick glance, a whisper and a snicker later, Daniel had already become their next target. "Check out the new hobo," Leo muttered, laughing with his crew. Daniel heard it, of course, but he didn't react. He simply turned the page of his notebook like nothing had happened. What no one knew was that this quiet, plain-looking boy carried a past and a last name that would soon turn their entire world upside down. But that was just the first piece of the puzzle. What came next? No one at that school was ready for. Daniel quickly became a shadow in the hallways. He moved like a ghost, always alone, never speaking unless called on, always keeping his head down. To most students, he was invisible, but to Leo and his gang, he was a perfect target. They tripped him in the hallways. They laughed when he dropped his books. They'd snatch his lunch tray and dump it in the trash just to see his face fall. And still, Daniel never reacted. No anger, no tears, no complaints. It was that silence that got under Leo's skin. He wanted a reaction. He needed Daniel to break, because deep down, bullies aren't powerful. They're just loud, and they hate silence more than anything. One afternoon, during gym class, Daniel's worn-out sneakers came apart at the sole. Leo saw it and couldn't help himself. "Nice shoes, Daniel. Did you get those from the dumpster?" The class roared with laughter. Daniel just bent down, tied the shoelace tighter, and kept going. No one knew that inside, his heart was pounding, and not from running. Among the students, only one person really noticed him, Sophia. She wasn't popular, but she was kind. She watched everything quietly, from the way Daniel never fought back, to the way he always read the same crumpled book during recess, sitting alone under the old oak tree. She began to wonder, who was this boy, really? Why didn't he speak? Why didn't he tell anyone what was happening? And most importantly, why did his eyes look like someone who had already seen too much of the world? What Sophia didn't know is that her questions would soon be answered, just not in the way she ever expected. It was a rainy Thursday when everything reached a breaking point. The class had been assigned a group project. Students gathered into teams, except for Daniel, who was once again left out. The teacher, trying to be fair, placed him in a group with Leo and two of his friends. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. At first they ignored him. Then they mocked every idea he timidly suggested. Finally, when he showed up with neatly handwritten notes and carefully drawn diagrams, Leo snatched the papers out of his hands. "What's this? You draw like a 5-year-old, Leo said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And before anyone could stop him, Leo crumpled the pages and tossed them in the air, letting them fall like confetti across the classroom. Daniel stood frozen, watching his hours of work flutter to the ground like dead leaves. The class burst into laughter. Even the teacher hesitated for a second before stepping in. Daniel knelt to gather his pages, one by one, in silence. That was the moment Sophia couldn't take it anymore. She stood up. "Stop it! Why do you always pick on him? What's your problem, Leo?" The room fell quiet, but Leo just smirked and said, "You defending the trash now, Sophia. Maybe you two belong together." Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't even look up. But as he picked up the last crumpled page, Sophia noticed something. A small logo printed on the corner of his notebook. One that didn't belong to the school. One that only she recognized. It was the crest of a luxury private academy. One her cousin attended, one that cost more per year than her parents made in 3. That night, Sophia decided to follow Daniel after school. What she discovered would change everything. It was already dark when school ended that day. Sophia kept her distance, walking a few steps behind Daniel as he made his way through the neighborhood. He didn't take the bus like the others. He didn't walk toward the poorer side of town either, where his clothes suggested he lived. Instead, he turned down a quiet street lined with tall trees and elegant old houses. Then, just before he reached the end of the block, a black luxury car slowly pulled up beside him. A man in a suit stepped out, nodded respectfully, and opened the door. Daniel got in without saying a word. Sophia stopped in her tracks. Her heart was pounding. What the hell was that? That night, she couldn't sleep. Her curiosity pushed her to search online. She typed his full name, Daniel Santoro, and hit enter. The results made her gasp. Daniel Santoro wasn't just anyone. He was the only son of Alessandro Santoro, a reclusive billionaire tech entrepreneur, a man who rarely gave interviews, a man whose name was on skyscrapers, foundations, and hospital wings. A man who had vanished from the public eye a year ago after the tragic death of his wife. And Daniel, he had completely disappeared from his elite school shortly after. Sophia stared at the screen in disbelief. Her heart ached as puzzle pieces clicked into place. The silence, the sadness in his eyes, the way he avoided everyone as if the world had betrayed him. He hadn't come to this school because he had to. He came to escape. But the real twist wasn't that Daniel was hiding his identity. It was why he was doing it. And soon, that secret would explode in front of the entire school. The school auditorium buzzed with chatter. It was career week, and parents had been invited to speak to students about their professions. Most kids were bored, scrolling through their phones until the final guest was introduced. Please welcome our next speaker, Mr. Alessandro Santoro. Silence, then whispers. Heads turned. Teachers froze. And when the tall man in a sharp suit walked onto the stage, some students stood in shock. Leo's mouth hung open. Sophia's eyes immediately searched for Daniel, who had entered quietly through the side door and taken a seat in the front row. Alessandro cleared his throat and began to speak. He didn't talk about business. He talked about loss, about grief, about stepping away from a world that only cared about money, and about the one person who reminded him every day what truly mattered, his son. And then his eyes found Daniel. He asked me for one thing, Alessandro said, a chance to be treated like a normal kid, to see how people behave when they don't know who you are. And he learned a lot. A wave of unease swept the room. Some treated him with kindness, others not so much. He paused, letting the silence speak. But the ones who stood by him when he had nothing, those are the ones who deserve everything. The principal rushed forward, trying to regain control of the moment. But it was too late. Everyone now knew the truth. Leo and his gang tried to laugh it off, but no one was laughing with them anymore. Meanwhile, Daniel stood up and walked toward the stage. The crowd parted. Eyes followed him, not with pity, not with mockery, but with something new, respect. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just turned to the audience and said calmly, "You never know who someone really is. So maybe try treating everyone like they matter." The applause that followed wasn't just for him. It was for the lesson he had just taught them all. After that day, nothing at school was quite the same. Daniel didn't suddenly become popular. He didn't show up in designer clothes or start flaunting who he was. He still sat quietly in class, still read during lunch. But now, the silence around him felt different. People gave him space, but with respect, not avoidance. And Sophia, she became his first real friend. One afternoon, as they walked home together, Daniel handed her an envelope. She opened it to find a scholarship letter, full tuition to the private academy his family supported, signed and sealed by the board. "I told my father about what you did," he said softly. "You stood up for me when no one else would. You believed in me before you knew anything about my name. That matters." Sophia's eyes welled up. She had never imagined her kindness would come back to her like this. As for Leo and his crew, they were forced to face the consequences, not through revenge, but through exposure. Their behavior had been witnessed, recorded, and discussed. Teachers were watching, students were awake, and slowly the school began to change because of one quiet boy who reminded everyone that humility doesn't mean weakness and that true strength often hides behind silence. So next time you see someone who seems out of place, quiet, or invisible, ask yourself, what if they're hiding a story bigger than you can imagine? And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, leave a comment, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. Because stories like Daniel's, they remind us what truly matters.